My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 34, and for the past 8 months, I've been living with my boyfriend, Richard. 8 months may not sound long, but it was long enough for me to feel a deep sense of partnership. At least that's what I told myself. Every month, I handled the bills: rent, utilities, groceries. Richard's name was on the lease, not because he was more responsible or capable, but because his credit had been shattered by student loans and maxed out credit cards. I didn't mind. I wanted to help him. I thought that's what being a couple was about. Richard worked part-time at a local bookstore, making barely half of what I earned as a network analyst. He never asked me to pay the bills. I offered. I never complained when I covered 80 to 90% of our shared expenses. I wanted us to feel like a team. I believed love was enough to balance the scales. I was wrong. That Friday night, Richard invited me to his friend Tessa's birthday party. I wasn't thrilled. Crowded rooms and forced conversations never were my thing, but he insisted. "It'll be fun, Samantha. Just come," he said, smiling that easy smile I still remembered fondly. When we arrived, the music was loud, the air thick with laughter and perfume. I felt out of place immediately, hovering near the edges of groups that had known each other far longer than I had known Richard. I sipped my drink, trying to make small talk, trying to ignore the growing knot of unease in my stomach. I wandered upstairs to use the bathroom. When I returned, the sound of Richard's voice froze me mid-step. It was coming from the living room, casual, laughing, his friends, Janine and Tessa, perched nearby like an audience. "I swear to God, he's so boring lately," Richard said, leaning back on the couch. "We never do anything fun anymore." Janine laughed. "Girl, what do you expect? Look at him, right?" I blinked, confused. My heart started pounding. Then came the words I would never forget. "I mean, I appreciate that he's stable or whatever, but damn, no spontaneity, no excitement, Tessa. Honestly, it's lucky I even stay with him. Between the boring personality and, let's be real, he's only average looking. I could do so much better, but the rent situation's convenient, and he doesn't complain when I buy stuff, so whatever." The laughter that followed wasn't joking. It was agreement, approval, affirmation. I stood there, stunned, as the room blurred. Every little thing, the skipped date nights, the half-hearted texts, the constant excuses, suddenly made sense. I don't know how long I stayed frozen. 10 seconds? 30? Enough to hear him laugh as if I were invisible. Panic flared in his eyes the moment he noticed me. "Hey, babe, we were just talking about you." I smiled lightly, masking the hurricane inside me. "Yeah, I bet. I'm going to head out. Not feeling great." "Oh, want me to come with?" he asked, his voice cautious. "No," I said, surprising even myself with the calm certainty in my tone. "Stay. Enjoy the party. See you at home." I kissed his forehead quickly and walked out. In the car, I called Devin, a close friend I trusted. "Can I crash at your place for a bit?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands shook on the steering wheel. Sure, everything okay?" "Not really. I need to get out now." I arranged for movers, explained the situation, and within 48 hours, I would be out. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. At home, I started sorting my belongings. 3 piles. Mine, his, unclear. I documented everything with photos. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every book. I wanted a clean slate. I wanted to make it clear. This is mine, and this ends now. When Richard returned around 2 a.m., he barely noticed me folding clothes. He went to bed as if nothing had happened. I didn't respond to his confusion or his half-hearted questions. By Sunday evening, the movers arrived. Within 90 minutes, everything I owned, my couch, TV, bed frame, kitchen appliances, clothes, books, was gone. Richard's things remained untouched, as they should. Utilities in my name were scheduled for shutoff at the end of the month. Rent was canceled. Lease? Technically in his name. I left a printed note on the counter, simple and precise. "Richard, you made it clear how you feel. I'm making it easy. I moved out. Utilities are shutting off at month's end. Lease in your name. That's on you. Everything here is yours. I took only my belongings. Good luck finding someone exciting enough. Samantha." I slipped out, key in hand, and drove straight to Devin's. I turned off my phone. Sleep came, heavy and necessary. Even now, as I replay those moments in my head, I feel the sting of betrayal, the humiliation of hearing him speak so casually about my worth, as if I were a character in a story he didn't care about. But beneath that, there's a seed of clarity, fragile but growing. I had chosen respect for myself over convenience for him. This was the beginning of something I didn't yet fully understand, a journey away from being someone's financial safety net and toward reclaiming my life entirely. The morning light felt strange and unfamiliar. Devin's apartment was quiet, almost too quiet after the chaos of the past 48 hours. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, my hands wrapped around it for warmth. It wasn't just caffeine I needed. It was clarity, a moment to breathe, to process that I had actually done it. I had left. The party replayed in my mind like a cruel film. Richard's laughter, the casual cruelty in his words, the way his friends had nodded and giggled along. It wasn't just a passing insult. It was the truth he had chosen to show me, and I had finally seen it. For so long, I had told myself I was overreacting, imagining things. But there it was, clear and brutal. I had been used. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera roll. Every picture of our apartment, every receipt, every corner of the place I had called home. It was all documentation, a record of my autonomy. I didn't need anyone to validate what I was doing. I needed evidence that I wasn't disappearing into thin air. I was leaving on my own terms, but I wasn't careless. Richard texted me repeatedly, numbers after numbers, messages that grew increasingly frantic. "Samantha, please, don't do this. I didn't mean it. I love you." I read them once, let them sit on the screen, and then silenced the notifications. They were noise, empty words after years of entitlement and disrespect. I began packing the final boxes that contained the last remnants of my life there, books I had loved, the coffee maker I had insisted on buying, the framed photographs that felt like evidence I had cared too much. My heart ached with each item, not for Richard, but for the years I had invested in believing we were a team. By the time the movers arrived, I was ready. I walked through the apartment one last time, noting the empty shelves, the clear countertops, the quiet that now belonged entirely to me. The movers took 90 minutes, and when they left, I held the door closed for a moment, inhaling the air as if it carried freedom itself. Then came the note. I left it on the kitchen counter where he could not miss it. "Richard, you made your feelings clear at the party. I heard every word. I am moving out. Utilities are shutting off at the end of the month. The lease is in your name. That is your responsibility now. Everything here is yours. I took only my belongings. Good luck finding someone exciting enough to stay when you make them feel like they are not. Samantha." I left the key in the lockbox, slipped out, and didn't look back. My heart felt heavy, but lighter than it had in months. The drive to Devon's was calm. The city blurred past me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt unseen chains loosen around my shoulders. Later that night, after finally lying down in a quiet room that was not his, I thought about all the times I had covered for Richard, paying bills, buying groceries, picking up the slack when he was late or tired or distracted. I had convinced myself it was love, but it had been subsidy, not partnership, and now I was free. Devon came by with takeout and a reassuring smile. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I knew I wasn't fully. Healing never is. "I am," I whispered. "I'm okay because I finally stopped letting him use me. I finally left, and I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just walked away." Devon nodded. "That's strong, Samantha. That's really strong." I smiled faintly, sipping the last of my cold coffee. Strength didn't feel like a badge yet. It felt like relief. Relief that I was no longer a spectator in my own life. The next few days were a whirlwind of administrative work, canceling utilities, updating accounts, and finalizing my financial independence. I documented everything meticulously. It wasn't about punishment, it was about boundaries. I wanted a clean break. No ambiguity, no loopholes. Richard's calls and texts kept coming, his voice laced with desperation and confusion, but I stayed resolute. Each message was a reminder of why I had left, why I could never return to that house or that dynamic. I was not responsible for his ego, his pride, or his reckless words. I started to feel the first stirrings of empowerment. Alone in Devon's apartment, I realized that the freedom I had feared, the quiet, the unknown, was actually a gift. I had chosen myself over humiliation, respect over convenience, clarity over chaos. And as I looked out at the city lights that night, I knew this was only the beginning. I was leaving behind not just a toxic relationship, but the version of myself that had believed love required sacrifice at the expense of self-worth. I was reclaiming my life. The week after I left Richard's apartment was surreal. The silence felt strange at first, but soon it became comforting. No more hidden glances, no more subtle manipulations, no more laughing at my expense while pretending everything was normal. Yet the outside world quickly reminded me that leaving a relationship, even the toxic kind, was never just between two people. My phone blew up. Richard called relentlessly, from different numbers, when I blocked the first. "Samantha, please, we can work this out. I didn't mean what I said." I read the messages once, closed the app, and walked away. My hands shook when I typed back nothing. Every unanswered message felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then came Tessa, Janine, and mutual friends. They called, texted, some pleading, others judgmental. "You're being too harsh. It's just words. Don't you care?" Each message tested my resolve. I reminded myself, over and over. I was leaving because he humiliated me publicly. I was leaving because I had been used financially and emotionally. I was leaving because I deserved respect. 2 days later, Richard's mother, Candace, called. Her tone was measured but sharp. "Samantha, my son is in a tough spot because of what you did. You abandoned him. He can't pay the bills now." I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head. "Candace," I said slowly, "I didn't abandon him. I moved out of a situation where I was being used and disrespected. He signed a lease. The utilities are in his name. Everything he is struggling with is the consequence of his own choices. I'm not his bank, and I'm not responsible for his humiliation of me." There was silence on the other end, and I could hear her weighing my words. She hadn't expected my calm, my clarity, my refusal to be guilted. I ended the call. Another victory, small but vital. The social pressure didn't stop. Tessa messaged me via LinkedIn, pleading for understanding. "Samantha, Richard is falling apart. Can't you cover just this 1 month? He's going to be homeless." I deleted it. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. I wasn't cruel. I was protecting myself. Covering the rent for someone who had laughed at me publicly wouldn't be help. It would be surrender. Richard escalated. New phone numbers, emails, desperate pleas. I ignored them all. I blocked, archived, deleted. Each message was a reminder that he didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a resource, a safety net, and I had cut myself free. Meanwhile, my friends rallied. Devin checked in constantly, offering quiet support. Zoe, his girlfriend, kept me grounded. They didn't try to tell me what to do. They reminded me why I had made this choice and celebrated the small victories of independence. A quiet apartment, a bank account in my name, freedom from manipulation. There were moments, yes, when the weight of social pressure threatened to make me doubt myself. Could I really leave someone behind when they were struggling? But I reminded myself, I was not responsible for his choices or his humiliation of me. He had built his life on my financial support, and he had openly scorned me while thinking I was none the wiser. That ended the moment I walked out the door. By the middle of the week, the first tangible consequences of Richard's choices began to appear. The landlord called about missed payments. Utilities were being shut off. And all the while, Richard's messages poured in. Some were desperate, some angry, all entitled. I didn't respond. I kept my focus on me, cooking my own meals, organizing my new apartment, sleeping in my own bed. Every small act of independence was a reminder that leaving was not only necessary but life-affirming. Late one night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, the city lights stretching out before me, and let it all settle. The betrayal, the humiliation, the frantic calls, the social pressure. It was all part of a larger lesson I had been forced to learn. Self-respect is non-negotiable. Richard, and everyone who tried to pull me back into that world, were witnessing the consequences of their actions. And I was witnessing the birth of a new version of myself, one that could thrive without being anyone's financial cushion, emotional crutch, or second-choice partner. For the first time in months, I felt truly alone and truly free. Weeks passed. Time has a strange way of smoothing over chaos, but it never erases it completely. My new apartment was smaller, simpler, but every corner whispered autonomy. I unpacked slowly, placing each item carefully, savoring the quiet freedom I had fought for. My life was no longer measured by Richard's moods, his indifference, or his expectations. I reconnected with myself. Early mornings were now mine, not dictated by his alarm clock or late-night video games. I cooked meals I enjoyed, reorganized my finances, and started exercising again. Each routine, each small decision, was a declaration. I belonged to myself first. Socially, things were shifting too. Mutual friends reached out, some cautiously, some apologetic for not recognizing what I had endured. There was judgment too, people who thought leaving was extreme. I understood that. But their opinions didn't matter anymore. I had finally witnessed the truth of my relationship. Richard had stayed for convenience and money, not love, and I had the courage to leave before losing even more of myself. Richard tried, of course. Texts, calls, emails, pleading, threatening, guilt-tripping. I didn't respond. When his mother reached out again, I was firm but calm. He had built a life dependent on my support and then mocked me for it. That was his responsibility, not mine. Boundaries were no longer negotiable. There were moments of quiet reflection, sitting alone in the evening light, when I allowed myself to feel the full weight of betrayal. It burned at first, sharp and stinging, but over time it transformed into clarity. Every act of humiliation, every careless word he had spoken about me, became proof that I had made the right choice. One evening, I scrolled through social media and noticed Richard had posted vague, bitter messages about partners who leave. I didn't linger. Instead, I closed the app and went to the kitchen to cook dinner, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables soothing in a way that no relationship ever had been. Financially, I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't expected. Not having to subsidize someone else's life meant I could save, plan, and even splurge occasionally on myself without guilt. Slowly, I began to rebuild the life I had paused for the sake of someone who didn't value me. I thought about the lesson I had learned. Never let anyone make you feel expendable. Never subsidize a life that doesn't respect yours, and never ignore what people say when they think you aren't listening. Richard's words at that party, the casual cruelty, were not just insults. They were revelations, and now I could live without them. It wasn't just about revenge or proving a point. It was about self-respect, dignity, and understanding that my worth was never tied to someone else's convenience. I had left a life built on imbalance, humiliation, and disrespect. And in doing so, I discovered freedom and peace I hadn't known I could claim. Sometimes I wondered how Richard would cope. Would he learn? Would he recognize what he had lost? I didn't need the answers. That was his journey, and it wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to myself, and I was fulfilling it beautifully. By the 8th week, my life had settled into a rhythm that was mine alone. I met new people, cultivated new friendships, and reestablished old ones. I spent evenings cooking, reading, and enjoying the quiet luxury of autonomy. There were no whispers of judgment, no secret laughs about me behind my back, just me, living fully and consciously in a life I had earned. Occasionally, I received messages from Richard, apologies scattered with guilt, explanations, and excuses. I read them once or twice, then archived them. He had made his choice. I had made mine. There was no going back. I understood finally that leaving wasn't failure. It was courage. It wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. And in that quiet, firm resolution, I found something I hadn't realized I was missing: peace. I thought about love, partnership, and respect in new terms. Love should never demand sacrifice at the expense of dignity. Partnership should never feel like exploitation. And respect is non-negotiable. As I sat by the window one evening, watching the city lights, I realized something else. I was no longer the woman who tolerated disrespect quietly. I was the woman who could see clearly, act decisively, and protect her life from those who would demean it. I had reclaimed myself entirely. Richard faded into memory, a lesson carved into my understanding of human relationships. I didn't hate him. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt clarity, freedom, and anticipation for the life I would now build, unburdened by anyone else's disregard. Sometimes people will say leaving is dramatic, that you should compromise, forgive, or help your partner even when they hurt you. I don't think so anymore. I learned that boundaries, self-respect, and courage matter far more than social expectation or guilt. I walked away from humiliation. I walked away from financial exploitation. I walked away from being anyone's backup plan. And in that walk, I found something extraordinary: myself.